Journeys Ahead, Beyond Trilogy, Part 3, Chapter 7, Spirits and Demons. Written and narrated by T.S. ProArt.
Father! Mother! Sister! Anyone!
Calling out with her paws cupped to her muzzle, Pawfnu slowly traversed alone within a strange and yet familiar land. From all around her soul, thousands of tall, cherry-blossom trees mixed with regular greens went up and past her ears. Below her paw beans, gentle soft grass swayed in a warm breeze as flower petals drifted on by from the sides. The sky in distant sight ahead had been fogged over within a misty red-pink shade that left the kitsune feeling odd. This place, it was almost a spitting image of her world. What she could remember of, that is. It was quiet, lonely. Not even the sound of a bird's chirp was to be heard.
Vivian! Chibi, Vod!
The fox continued the call before simply stopping, taking a breath, and sitting down upon a fallen over log. Exhaling, Pawfnu raised both of her hands and pressed them against the sides of her face. Shakily breathing out, the kitsune glanced from her surroundings, not particularly feeling much from its image. Rather, more for the fact that she was alone.
It's okay. You'll be okay. The others are there. The others are probably searching for you. Yeah, you'll be okay.
In a nervous tone, Pawfnu began talking herself down to try and ease her nerves. If she was to be honest with herself, she had never liked the prospect of being alone. From as far back as she could remember, Pawfnu had been attached at Void's side, always knowing where he was, or what he was supposedly up to. Yet here, it was an uncertainty.
You'll be fine. You didn't just evolve to act like a scared puppy. You're strong. Just as you tell everyone else that they are as well. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Pawfnu continued to speak as her stomach suddenly began to growl. Looking down and patting her thin belly, she reached behind herself into her back robe pocket and pulled out a can of tuna, an emergency snack as she would internally call it. Sighing, she summoned out her pink chain dagger and began to cut into the can's lid. After a few jabs and bends, the top popped right off, giving Pawfnu entry into one of her favorite dishes. Reaching in, she began to pluck chunks of fish out and drop it into her mouth. Chewing down slowly, the fox continued to stare ahead at her strange world creation. It was like looking at an old photo from when one was a baby. You recognized it, but there was no sense of nostalgia. Rather, a curious nature that left one wondering as to what it was like before the memories took form. The red tree swayed, as nothing but the breeze tickled Pawfnu's ears, that sometimes twitched at the touch. Slowly blinking without so much as a word, the kitsune continued to stuff her face while still feeling a sense of deep unease.
Would have preferred it cooked,
she muttered while taking yet another bite. As she did, a new sense washed over her, one that halted her mid-bite. It was the sensation of being watched. Blinking with a now furrowed brow, the fox quickly glanced to her left, seeing nothing of note, and then to her right, and dropped everything. There, standing in the fog, was Jay. Or rather, his outline, just standing still, unmoving.
Jay?
the fox asked, while suddenly standing to her feet. The outline didn't move nor speak. It just remained ominously still, causing Pofnu's large tails to bristle with unease. Displaying a shocked face, the fox left her food behind and began to swiftly approach the spark. However, he suddenly turned and sprinted off into the fog with no warning.
Wait! Jay!
Pofnu called as she began to sprint as well. Breaking into the fog, the kitsune did her best to keep up with the spark. However, his outline somehow managed to run much faster than anticipated, leaving Pofnu behind in the dust.
Wait! Pop!
She called, before suddenly getting halted by an echoing voice.
Why didn't you try and stop me?
It was Jay, speaking from behind. Whirling around into a sliding stop, Pofnu stared down the fog in a state of confusion.
What?
She asked, as Jay spoke again from the side.
Why didn't you properly train me?
He asked, getting Pofnu to turn again.
Jay, what are you?
She asked, now feeling a cold sweat as the voice came again, this time from the right.
Why didn't you teach me better? Why didn't you stop me? Why did you let me go?
The disembodied voice exclaimed, causing Pofnu's face to fall into a small and worried stare.
Jay,
she asked before hearing another voice.
He's gone because of you. Why didn't you teach him properly?
It was Void, sounding extremely angry.
Father?
Pofnu asked as her legs and tails began to shake.
You could have done more. Now my boy is stuck with that monster.
Jada called, causing Pofnu's eyes to glisten and water.
Mother, I tried to. I did what I could.
She called right back in slight chokes as a wave of lingering guilt began to flow into her soul.
You went too easy on him. Now look where we are.
Joby exclaimed, causing Pofnu to slowly back up in a worried dread.
Guys,
The fox sadly mumbled in a now fully shaking tone as the voices continued on.
I am deeply disappointed in your efforts, Pofnu.
Void said as the fox's heart began to race.
He'll never be our father.
Joby boasted.
You're just a worthless animal.
Jida exclaimed as Pofnu now began to panic.
You failed me, Pofnu.
Jay's voice called in the right ear of Pofnu, causing her to yelp and fall down a steep but small cliffside she had noticed. Landing hard with a yelp, the fox tumbled through wet mud and jagged rocks. With each hit, the robes that her father had gifted upon her got torn up and dirtied. Her lower skirt became a mangled mess. The fabric spark crest on her chest slashed up into a disaster. Her sleeves splashed with dirt and cut by stone. As it all started, it suddenly came to a halt, as Pofnu came to a rough stop upon the lower forest. Gasping with scrapes and bruises, the Kitsune warrior slowly got on her hands and knees in a pained wince. Seepings of blood leaked out of her fur and skin as it stained her tarnished robes. Her once bund-up hair had now fallen down, making it look like Jida's, but more on the messier side of things. Sniffling, the fox wiped her tears upon realizing that it had only been a beyonder illusion. However, the words shared were very much real, at least to her.
Damn it.
She groaned with a weep before standing to her feet. Holding her left arm, the fox took in a breath and began to maneuver forwards and into a much darker and eerie forest. Instead of red and green trees, these were all purple and black, with a matching fog in its path. Removing her hand from her arm, the kitsune shriveled upon the sight of her own blood staining her palm. Yet, she almost felt as though she had deserved it.
It's my fault. I should have trained him better. Told him off on that notion of bringing up that damn ability.
Pofnu gruffed out before leaning against a tree.
I guess I am to blame for all of this,
she said with a silent, rolling tear before taking notice of the light above starting to fade. The sun was going down, she realized.
Fire. Need to start the fire,
she told herself before clutching her arm again and moving ahead.
Must start the fire,
she repeated before descending further into the darkness. As night took over the trial's realm, Pofnu now sat in a small clearing that had been surrounded by trees. Before her was a lit orange fire that had been the only light and sound source within this eerily dark realm. No crickets chirped, wolves ceased to howl, and all that was heard was both the wind and faint crackle from her heat source. The fog had completely submerged the stars and moon into darkness, leaving the fox all the more on edge. Sitting with her legs tucked into her chest, Pofnu rested in her light pink underclothes, only wearing a tank top, shorts, and leg-wrapped shoes. With a sigh, she glanced to her side, seeing her torn-up robes drying in the flames' heat.
Father's gonna be so pissed,
she told herself before taking a stick and poking at the wood upon the flames.
Or maybe he's always been pissed,
Pofnu speculated as the burning embers danced off her eyes in tangerine shades.
I should have spent more time with him. I should have taught him to fight in a different way. What was I thinking?
Pofnu angrily said to herself in hurtful words as she listened back to what the illusion said to her.
But he was 12. He couldn't... I should have... Matira's might.
Pofnu groaned before placing her right hand atop her gangly hair.
Who am I kidding? I'm not father. I'll never be such a soul as him. I can never even match myself to his wisdom and knowledge.
Leaning her head back upon crossed arms, Pofnu now stared up at the dark abyss above her head, squinting in hopes to see some semblance of the cosmos. However, all she was greeted with was the eternal nothing.
He will always be a better teacher, and I his inferior.
After a few seconds of self-silence, Pofnu, oddly enough, cracked a smile, then placed both of her hands upon her face.
Oh my god. Now I'm starting to sound like Jay. How ironic,
she said to herself while shaking her head, before looking back out to the empty abyss above.
Don't think the power of believing in myself is gonna work for this old fox. Not after these 2 years. Not after.
Slowing down her words, Pofnu proceeded to roll her eyes and then sit back upright, looking into the flames with a squinting stare.
And I'm talking to myself. Jesus Christ, I am talking to myself,
she said while throwing her arms up and then back down.
Don't I now just sound insane, huh?
She called to the world before placing both her hands on the ground and simply hanging back.
Echo, 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 echo. Hello? Anyone here? If this trial is about self-silence, then that would be honestly disappointing,
the kitsune called, staring up to the sky.
Throw a showstopper at me again. He was kinda hot. Or how about the therapy session? Yeah, hopefully you gave Joby one of those.
Pofnu called again to the Beyonders, unsure of whether or not they would answer.
Oh, maybe a member of my own kind, that would...
Actually, no, I don't think I'm mentally prepared for that one. I think I'd rather just stick to the voices. Biting the inside of her cheek, the fox hugged her legs once again and went back to looking at the flames as per standard. And saying that out loud just makes things sound even more insane on my end. Well, that's my life, I suppose. She mumbled before just resting in silence again. That was for hearing a loud and wet Immediately shooting up to her feet, Pofnu activated her Naginata and rolled herself around, seeing nothing but the darkness staring back.
The hell?
She spat through a tense whisper as she began to glance around her surroundings. The sound, although short, was animalistic, yet oddly human. It was akin to a massive man clearing his throat, a deep and wet Splitting her weapon in the two blades, Pofnu stood in a samurai-esque stance and slowly scanned her surroundings. There was nothing but a deep set of flames and the faint outline of closing in trees. However, there was something else amidst this moment in time. A smell. A nasty smell that was akin to that of rotting, sunburnt roadkill. Squinting and shaking her head, Pofnu tried to shake the smell of death away as it felt to punch her senses with fists of iron.
Oh, Paimatira, what is that?
She asked as a twig suddenly snapped to her side. Whirling around with both weapons readied, Pofnu felt a cold sweat pour down her brow at the lack of sight to her aggressor. Soon enough, another twig snapped, this one closer. Turning again, Pofnu began to slowly hyperventilate as the smell got stronger. Another twig. Pop. Another crack. Shaking, Pofnu was beginning to lose focus. Not only could she not see the enemy, but she was alone. No one to help or to simply watch. Turning her head once more, she suddenly stopped upon seeing something at long last. Two beady eyes staring at her from the dark. A pair of red and purple dots. That's all she could see. Holding her breath, Pofnu stared at the odd eye shine, glistening off the fire, as it stared back with an empty gaze. Without saying a word, she just readied her weapons, and then began to watch, as they then slowly began to rise. 1 foot off the ground, 2 feet, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Following the eyes rising up, Pofnu witnessed them surpass the 9-foot mark, while feeling a sense of absolute dread. There was something different about this than the previous threats she had faced, a feeling that chiseled away at her own being, when they left her terrified. With the speed of a slow-moving turtle, this mysterious being began to emerge into the light. Poking out from the darkness, first came the teeth, bone-white, sharp teeth that looked to drool with a black ooze. Then the nose socket, the bones of a muzzle to some kind of animal that looked rotted and old. And the face, or rather, lack thereof. All Pofnu could see was a bone skull, front with 2 side sockets, empty, dark, with the 2 ghostly beady eyes being deep in the back of its skull. It was then Pofnu realized what she was looking at. It was the skull of a large fox.
Demon,
she whispered, an enemy of her once spectral race. As she whispered this, the creature's bony paw crawled out into the light, being surrounded in a darkened haze of spectral energy. Then its other claw, before it suddenly stood on its hind legs, going from 9 feet to a whopping 18 feet off the ground. Now showing its rib cage, Pofnu could see it expanding and closing in, as though it had been breathing. Not wanting to waste another second in fear, she quickly slashed her blades upon the ancient enemy. She could sense it through her people's distant knowledge, but the demon was far faster compared to the kitsune. With one swipe with its claws, it shattered apart the fox's blades and sent her rolling back in shock. Getting up with a grunt, Pofnu watched as the demon took one step forwards and crushed her robes beneath its feet. No! She called with a reach as the monster dropped down to one rotted paw and roared with a now glowing blue eternal flare beneath its bones. No! Pofnu wordly called as she turned on her heel and began to run away. Within her soul, she could faintly hear the sounds of distant voices, calls of the past, telling her to run, and run she did. Blindly sprinting through the darkness, Pofnu swung her arms and tried to blast ahead with her tails. But the demon, whatever it was, felt as though to be draining her energy. Looking over her shoulder, Pofnu watched in horror as the monster sprinted after her upon all fours. With its mouth open wide, she could see that her spectral essence had been getting drained from her tails and collecting into the demon's mouth. Solita, threat, run. The voices within Pofnu's soul exclaimed as she listened without flaw. Leaping over a log and hopping a stone, Pofnu did her best to stay away from the beast as it gave its endless chase. The ground beneath Pofnu's feet shook, the trees rattled upon the beast's presence as she continued to run and run. It was getting closer, barking out its evil hacks and groans that sent shivers down the kitsune's back. Go away! She called with welling tears as the words from before stabbed at her brain. Her fault, she kept telling herself. This was all your fault. To this, the demon looked to grow in size, feeding off the kitsune's pain, making it stronger by leeching off her agony. Gasping, the oldest Novasun child watched as the monster snapped its jaws and closed in upon her body. With one chomp, she would have been done for. It would have been all over. However, before death could snatch her into its grasp, Pofnu suddenly felt the ground beneath her shatter, and in turn, caused her to fall. Yelling in shock, she spun downwards into a darkening abyss, leaving her already panicked mind to flare into an even worse state.
Sister, awaken.
Opening her eyes to the sound of a calm and soothing voice, Pofnu awoke within a realm that was all black, but outlined in red shines. Looking upwards, she could see an endless void with little red stars, while butterflies of the same color fluttered on by. Squinting, the kitsune found herself within a body of beautiful water, filled with lilacs and lily pads. There had even been the small sound of distant frogs croaking. Slowly sitting upright, the kitsune warrior suddenly realized where she was. It was a soul realm, the same kind that she had been in when teaching Jay. However, this wasn't the sparks. It appeared to have been her own. Looking down at herself, Pofnu found that she was now donned in long and beautiful red robes. It looked as though to be crafted from the angels themselves. Feeling them, she was shocked as to how silky they were, smooth and fun to feel.
What the?
She asked, before suddenly taking notice of an outstretching pawed hand before her eyes. Focusing forwards, Pofnu's jaw suddenly dropped in shock. She gazed upon more of her kind. Or rather, astral projections of her kind. They were tall and robed as well. However, featureless. They had the outline of her own kind, but their faces looked smoothed over, only having 2 glowing dots for eyes, but noticeably large tails. 9 in total that made Pofnu look scrawny in comparison. Although mainly featureless, Pofnu could tell that these spirits were males, 3 in total, big, fit, and oddly threatening.
No. No way. It's you.
The fox said in awe, recognizing the voice, before taking the spirit by his large paw. With the strength of a gentle giant, this massive fox helped Pofnu stand to her feet within the water. Looking down upon her, the main spectral force closed his eyes and then nodded his head, while the other two approached.
You're all...
She began to speak, before getting answered by one of them.
We are the manifestations of the past, the souls of those who had once been.
Turning her head, Pofnu couldn't even begin on where to speak. It was really them, or rather, what they had become.
Did you save me from that thing? How?
The fox asked, as they all began to march through the water and towards what appeared to be a distant waterfall from afar.
No, it was the gods. They have brought you here to help ease the damage in your soul.
One of the spirits revealed as ghostly fish swam by their feet.
However, whatever it may be, there isn't much time. The manifestation of our ancient foe lingers close.
Another one of the ghosts expressed, while gentle red petals fell from the sky above.
The damage in my soul?
Pofnu asked as they all crossed through the waterfall and entered into a beautiful meditation spot. Long petal leaf trees curved upwards above a small patch of grass, one with tons of blooming flowers that looked almost akin to a bed. Slowly approaching, the main front spirit held out his hand and gestured for Pofnu to take it. Looking upon it, the fox reached out and gripped her paw around his. From this, the other two kitsunes separated and stood upon both halves of the small island, while Pofnu and the first slowly ascended to its nature-taken form.
Sister, I sense a great deal of lingering dread in your heart. Something dark enough to have allowed the demon to manifest in this realm.
The first fox expressed with worry, as he turned and now held both of Pofnu's hands. Together, they both stood upon the center of the island, as a gentle glint of yellow light seeped its way in through the cracks.
We have to be quick. Open your mind and soul. Be not afraid of your troubles. Speak to us, and us alone.
Looking from her ancestors' manifestations, and then down to the floor, Pofnu's mind began to race with thought and sorrow, as the demons that had been bottled up inside slowly began to creep their way out of her throat.
I feel as though I have failed the pup. My family.
She revealed, looking back up to her brother.
I feel as though I didn't teach him well enough. He was brash in his final moments. Made a decision that I could have convinced them to never do.
Gripping onto her relative's hand tighter, Pofnu winced and then closed her eyes in shame.
I could have done more. I could have found a way to stop it, to save him from this place. I could have taken more time to help him understand some of his powers. I feel as though...
Pofnu rambled, as the spirit before her began to speak up.
Sister, you did all you could. The pup would have always been brash. It is their nature. To be truthful, you did exponentially well for your first time mentoring.
Blinking and then looking to the side, Pofnu sighed before continuing on with her words.
But I'm not my father. I tried to think as he would, to try ways to make things easier, our ways. I could have done so much more, though. I should have been closer to him. I should have been harder on him to drive the nail home. I should have...
The boy is alive, is he not?
The spirit asked, cutting Pofnu off her trail of pity.
Yes.
She answered with a quiet tone of voice.
You and him saved everyone, did you not?
The spirit asked again, causing Pavnu to wince.
Yes, but he
made the choice on his own terms.
The fox finished for her, as the sound of a distant gruff echoed from outside.
Sister, how can you blame yourself for what has happened, what he had done? You had no control over what his intentions would be. You merely gave him the strength to make his own acts.
Lowering her head, Pavnu winced with slight tears as she began to speak more on her mind.
That's the thing. I could have said something more. I could have done anything to prevent this from happening. I pulled the trigger on his actions.
The fox said with a heavy sense of guilt emanating from her words.
Actions that he enacted. You did what was in your nature, to be a guardian. The pup made his own decision, not to you. There shall be no blame upon what he has become at the present.
The ancestor expressed before wiping a tear from his sister's face.
Guilt has very quick ears to an accusation, sister. It is always hungry. You must not let it consume you.
Letting go of Pavnu's hands, the spirit raised his own up and gently caressed the sides of her fluffy cheek tufts, while nodding low with closed eyes.
No matter how frustrated, disappointed, and discouraged we may feel in the face of our supposed failures, it is only temporary, and the faster you can stop wallowing in guilt, blame, or resentment, the faster you can put it behind you.
He went on, before pressing his forehead down upon the Novason daughter.
Don't be so hard on yourself, sister. Sure, you could have done more, but think of the situation you were in. What was happening? You did everything you could.
To these words, Pavnu fully pressed her head against her distant brother, allowing for the golden light above to shine brighter and warmer.
You're not perfect, but nobody is. Learn from what has happened, but don't punish yourself. Be kind to yourself. Even when you actually screw up, you'll bounce back eventually. You'll make up for it.
Reaching around, the spirit pulled Pavnu in close and embraced her into a well-needed hug that she welcomed with open arms.
As you taught him, and as your father taught you, listen to your heart and follow your soul. With that, you'll be okay in the end.
The spirit said, giving Pavnu the chance to take in a breath of relief.
I suppose you're right. Thank you,
she whispered before opening her eyes again and seeing that she was in a new environment. The meditation spot was gone, and she was back in her underclothes and messy form. It was all dark, except for one thing. Shining within the golden ray of light was both a cherry-bladed, gold-hilt katana that was stabbed into the ground, along with a brand new kitsune battle mask, this time being made from a much harder plastic-like material and having a pure black color with red accents upon it. This mask had two cherry-colored bells at its side and was dangling from the sword's hilt, looking that it had been calling for Pavnu's hand. Slowly approaching, Pavnu stared down upon the items before feeling the sudden inclination to take it. Within her soul, the spirits of the past felt to beckon her on to claim the items. Taking a breath, Pavnu approached and reached out. With slow and relative ease, she plucked the mask off the blade and stared into its red, painted eyes. After brushing some dust off its face, Pavnu took a deep breath, turned the item around, and gently set it on her face. Upon doing this, the red paint on the mask suddenly shimmered to life with color and unleashed a red wave of energy across the fox. Within a flash, Pavnu suddenly felt all of her pain on her body heal and fade, with an added set of clothes manifesting over her fur. Looking down in shock, Pavnu was greeted with pure black robes with a cherry red underdress that was donned with a beautiful stitching of the Sparks insignia. In a way, it looked to have been inspiration from her father's current attire, and with that, she couldn't complain. Looking at her robe's tail ends, Pavnu could see the Japanese symbol for peace on both sides that left her feeling rather, well, at peace. Her hair had been bunned up again, but this time with a soft white tassel that kept more of the hair back and out of the way. Patting herself down, Pavnu felt these new clothes to be the same silky material from the spirit realm, a gift, she assumed, perhaps one from the Beyonders. She couldn't tell, but couldn't complain. Yet, as this happy thought crossed her soul, she heard the sound again, the gruffing, the running, the demon. Without even turning around, Pavnu reached out and took hold of the katana. Pulling its long blade out from the ground, the fox rolled herself around and slashed. As she did, a beautiful red cut went shooting out and in turn sliced the demon, who was less than 5 feet away, in half. As its skeletal form shattered upon the ground, Pavnu stood in a readied sword stance, while feeling a new pair of clothing summoning over her body. It was a brown sword case, one that went over her back with ease. Looking at her new and glowing red blade, Pavnu swiftly turned it and slid the weapon into the holster with a satisfying click.
Still got it,
she said with a tiny smirk as a golden arched door opened behind her. Turning her head, Pavnu took off the mask and hooked it to the side of her hip, while rays of what felt to be heaven washed upon her. She was unaware of what this was, but it appeared to have been her only exit.
Hang on, little pup. I'm far from giving up on you,
Pavnu whispered before marching forwards and crossing through the light with a newfound sense of pride in her soul.